TOHO. Connected Knowledge.
Hello, I'm your host, Mario Kessa. I'm the Executive Director of TOHO, Nova's Tourism and Hospitality Platform. TOHO's vision is to be an innovative, impactful, international and multidisciplinary platform that is a reference for research and education in tourism and hospitality, creating value for its ecosystem by leveraging the capabilities of Nova schools. This is the TOHO podcast where experts meet to debate how to connect knowledge at the service of tourism and hospitality. Every episode, we will discuss one topic with a market expert and an academic expert. Reach us on Twitter at NovaUNL or Facebook and Instagram at Universidade Nova Lisboa. Visit our website at toho.unl.pt. Today's podcast is about sustainability. I'm honored to be here with Julia Seixas and Pedro Barata. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation. Julia Seixas is professor at the Faculty of Science and Technology of the Nova University of Lisbon. She coordinates the Energy and Climate Group of the Sensei Research Center dedicated to the transition and transformation of energy system towards climate neutrality. She has coordinated studies supporting public policies on climate mitigation for over 20 years, including the coordination of the modeling of the roadmap to carbon neutrality 2050. Julia has also been chair of the Department of Environmental Sciences and Technology. Again, thank you very much for being with us. Pedro Martins Barata is climate director at Environmental Defense Fund, an environmental NGO and consultant at Get2C, working on climate change and international carbon market issues for 25 years. Pedro Martins Barata was a member of the International Carbon Market Regulatory Body between 2008 and 2012, and is also a consultant to several international institutions such as the European Commission, the OECD, and the World Bank. In 2018, he led the work of the Roadmap for Carbon Neutrality in Portugal. He's currently a member of the Science Based Targets Advisory Board and chairman of the Voluntary Carbon Market Expert Panel. Welcome again, Pedro. So let's start with Julia. Julia, what brought you into sustainability and more particularly environmental sustainability? How did that passion grow in you?
Well, it's quite easy to answer that question because I'm involved in this subject since I was 18 years old when I decided to study environmental engineering. At that time in the 1980, it was a very pioneering course in the Portuguese university. So since then, more than 40 years, I don't care to know that, but I'm very engaged with in professional terms since then, so at the university in education programs, but also in many other kinds of studies and projects, R&D projects or projects for the society. And along the time, I'm also being involved not only with sustainability, not only as academic or a professional, but also as an activist in several movements, not in a very organized one, but in several for specific causes I've been involved along the time. So
okay,
more than 40 years.
Started very early, at the time that everything was hunky-dory when it came to sustainability. Nobody actually spoke about
action. I remember my father very worried with me. Well, what are you going to do with your life? Right. What is this about?
Well, it turns out today it's one of the most actual themes. Pedro, same question to you, basically. How did you grow into the sustainability and more specifically environmental sustainability?
Right. So it started with a good friend, inviting me to join an environmental NGO at the time when I was not 18, but maybe 20, 21 or so. And then growing into the subject of environment and environmental economics. I was an economics student in my bachelor's, and at one point when I finished my bachelor's, I had to decide what next. So there was a critical week where I had gotten a job at a management consulting firm, but also gotten a placement at a master's in London on environmental economics. And so I did consult with a famous person here in Portugal in environmental issues at the time, Carlos Pimenta, and his take was, if I were you, I would follow follow your heart and go to London. I cannot promise you anything, but I think we will be needing somebody with that kind of training, and it paid off.
Right.
That's all I can say.
It turned out to be the right decision,
Yeah.
basically. Great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Julia, you are, I can say, an expert in climate change, and being that a focus area. What do you regard as the main challenges specifically in tourism when it comes to climate change? I mean, tourism has been a contributor, for the good or the bad, to climate change. Do you think also that enough is being done? I mean, what are the challenges, and do you think, there's way more to be done to address the issue?
Yeah. Tourism is indeed an activity with, let's say, a carbon footprint that is important one. Mm-hmm. I remember to read this that for the whole carbon emissions, tourism represent about 8%, and 50% of this amount regards to travel, mainly aviation. So I think that the key challenge, number one challenge for tourism regarding climate change, is the tourism model that we have today. I don't know if you can use this word, the fast tourism, as we use that, the fast food.
You're referring to mass tourism?
To mass tourism, for
volumes,
yeah.
Right.
It's volumes, but also the type of
the frequency of travel.
The frequency of travel.
Right.
I mean, if people have 1 week to go away for vacations, mm-hmm. Usually they decide to go to 2 different sites, right. Which includes, let's say, 3 or 4 trips. And this is very acceleration. I mean, it's right. The way we approach the tourism and the way we approach what we want to get from tourism. I think you have to change the mindset on that and make it a bit slow. I mean, stay at a time in the local that you decide, in the place that you decide to pass your days, to spend your days, and this could bring to you a different return, a different service that you have to understand what it is. Mm-hmm. So I think the number one challenge for the tourism is to understand if the model that we have, I mean, mostly, still is the same, still needs to become the same one, or it became to be a different one. Right. Because when you change your mindset regarding to the tourism model or what you want from the tourism, your tourism experience, you will change the other parts of the tourism, not only the travel. Right. You will be more connected with the local food, with local culture. I mean, everything will become different, and this brings many benefits for the whole system, not only for the climate system, but also from the local economies, mm-hmm. and most of all for each one. I mean,
impacting the entire ecosystem,
yeah,
so to say. So basically, less frequency, less volumes, reinvent. What people should prioritize is when
I'm pretty sure that maybe we can get these less volumes, but this less frequency. But regarding the volume, I'm not so sure about it, because for one reason that I do not know to elaborate on, I do not have the expertise for that. The human being loves to travel. So I'm one of these persons.
It is innate. We all love to travel. So.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, that's a very specific challenge to address. And when we talk about addressing these kind of challenges, Peter, what would be your view on how to tackle, for instance, the issue that Julia just brought up, which is basically, change the model of tourism in terms of, especially. Trying not to have, it's almost like the slow food movement into tourism when it comes to travel, right? How would you say, if you were to choose a few examples of how this could be tackled, or what would be the players that would need to be involved? Because other than the individual mindset, I would imagine that, this involves the whole ecosystem. So where would you start? I know it's a vast question, but just give us your take on the few priorities to tackle these issues.
Before I do, I want to just backtrack a little bit, because we're talking about climate change and tourism, and I think one of the impacts that's been underestimated, and at least in my view, is actually in a country like Portugal is the impacts of climate change on what we offer as tourism. And it goes to what Julia said. We, for many years, and we're trying to diversify, but for many years, our main offer was sun and beach, right? That model is going to be impacted in terms of demand, for example, for many reasons. If I'm in London and my weather is starting to change and becoming, if you want, more Mediterranean, why would I bother taking a plane from Gatwick to the Algarve?
To go to Portugal.
Because I could go to Brighton, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing that those patterns will change. We don't know how much they will change, but it's something that I would call attention to. Then going back to the change in the business model of tourism, I think it's already happening to an extent in places like Portugal, where we're seeing a move to diversify away from this mass tourism, heavily concentrated, almost urban tourism to a certain extent, and moving away to an offer that is more, looking at the specificity of the local economy. So we're seeing that with offers around, wine regions, around agricultural regions, the food offers that are placed in kind of the regional context. Who is to play a part in that? I think it's a bit, like you said, it's a huge community. It's like, it takes a village in a way. It's everyone from local governments, the regional tourism offices here. If we're talking about Portugal, for example, the regional tourism boards. It's actually the environmental community as well. So the environmental NGOs. It's in fact, I would say all the industry itself, because as I mentioned, I think the industry of tourism, if there's such a thing, needs to start taking climate change kind of as a mainstream issue. And when they do that, they will reflect on a lot of their practices. So we have this, already we have, sustainability certification, et cetera, but it tends to focus on things like water use. We all have seen that we go into a hotel room and there's this little message,
about the towels,
think about the planet and don't, drop your towels in the bathroom floor, something like that. So I think that's fine, but those are in the overall context, that's really baby steps. Right. You need to go much further in terms of energy use, in terms of water use, in terms of looking at your footprint. And that requires also looking at even what you're offering. Because the message that comes out when you go, if you go to a place, a hotel, let's say a common hotel in a mass market type of destination, the message you get is one that is very much, let's say, unecological. Maybe, yes, you have the towel, but you're driven around in buses. You go to places where there's no recycling. The whole idea is geared towards making a huge footprint, right. and really not really paying a lot of attention to the region, the local people. So what are they doing?
It boils down to what Julia said. It's the typology, the model that has to change, because you cannot walk the talk just by minor initiatives and then at the end of the day do contradictory things which leave a massive carbon footprint.
I'll give you one example that Julia may remember this. We both of us are veterans of climate talks, right? And these are huge events with thousands of people, and we were involved in one in particular in Bali, 2007. Mm-hmm. So here we are. There's thousands of people coming to Indonesian resort with top level hotels, and somebody found out just at the end of the conference. Somebody found out that the air conditioning systems of all of these hotels were leaking profusely a extremely potent greenhouse gas.
Wow.
To the point where it was really calamitous, I would say, right? So what kind of message, if this happens with climate change conferences, what kind of message that
it's
is
very
that giving?
incoherent.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Pedro. And allow me later to get back to you, because, I mean, we could go on for hours talking about all these issues, and we're not going to solve world hunger. But I think the purpose here is really understanding what steps can we take and are we taking already. And to that point, a question I wanted to ask you. We know the Portuguese Tourism Board is being very active in Portugal, and you know, touching upon some of the things that Pedro said. Yes, there is also a focus more and more, not only in Portugal and other countries, to sort of value the ecosystem that is related to those places that have not been so commonly visited. And you know, there's a lot of efforts being done also in the movement of tourists, and you know, it's an ongoing exercise, obviously. But to that point, I wanted to ask Julia, could you share, I mean, through our platform, we've been working with your team in particular on a project for the Regional Tourism Board, which was on carbon neutrality. Can you explain us a little bit what this all was about and what ultimately your output is of that project?
Yeah, it was an interesting project. The project was focused on identifying and assessing the options for the most common typology of tourism infrastructure, like hotel, 4-star hotel, could take in terms of technology, in terms of changing the process, in terms of cost effectiveness, in order to become these equipments, this infrastructure more towards carbon neutrality, to be decarbonizing. It was very interesting for a couple of things. The first one is to understand how complex it could be. Even the solutions are quite simple, indeed, because for a building today, there are lots of options with many costs, I mean a wide range of costs that the manager could adopt for that building. But at a certain point, it comes for a decision for appliance to different investments. And I have to say that this exercise, this project was developed during the pandemics, where the hotels were completely closed in this white covering all the furniture. It was horrible, I have to say, to visit hotels like that. So in terms of solutions, it was a positive outcome. In terms of expectations, the thing has been suspended a little, because the business people are waiting for what it came. But I'm convinced that there is no return point on that. I was reading this week a report made by the European Travel Associations that has a very complete data on results from surveys from different countries, different segment of persons. And it is very amazing to understand that young people, that will be the increasing clients of the tourism industry, have explained their concerns, and they are not available, for example, to use aviation so much as their parents used to do. They don't, I mean, it's very interesting to look at what would be the demand of the tourism industry in the next couple of years, you know? And the tourism industry has to adapt to this new demand. Otherwise, it will be selling something that they don't want to. I fully agree with Pedro is saying, and I also defend that. That is to spread the tourism products to other parts. And I have to say two things about that. The first one is that this is very important for local communities. In several countries, in many countries indeed, in the world, the tourism receipts are the only ones they have to give some well-being and to preserve the ecosystem. So there are very nice touristic models respecting the ecosystem status and so on. But there are other things that are not. We have also to take care. That is. If you put some spot on a rural area or whatever without knowing what we call in environmental engineering the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, you simply are going to destroy or degrade this ecosystem as well. So it's very important to take care about sustainability, not only in terms of emission reductions in the infrastructure, but also to enlarge that, to taking care about the quality of the ecosystem, to keep the ecosystem as it is, or better, even if you can restore or...
That's a great takeaway. So basically, yes, we are focusing on sustainability, environmental sustainability, this conversation, but at the end of the day, it all touches upon social sustainability, economic sustainability, and they cannot be looked upon loose from one another.
Sustainability at this moment is in the central to economics of the economy.
And another good takeaway, I think, is that there's a lot of stakeholders, and they all need to individually be addressed, because it has to be a win-win for everybody when you talk about sustainability as well. Now, I'd like to get back to what you just said also when it comes to the role of universities in sort of achieving these goals. But I'd also like to ask Pedro a question in regards to the corporate world. When you talk about sustainability, that's one thing. But one thing is talking about it, the other thing is walking the talk, right? How, based on your experience with corporations, or what do you think ought to be done when it comes in particular to the leadership that allows a company to walk the talk on the sustainability? What needs to be done there? Are people, for instance, tourism itself has obviously a very fragmented amount of players. You have smaller ones, mid-sized ones, you have a few bigger players as well. But how do you reach those that are ultimately going to sort of, set the tone for, making their teams, making their companies sustainable? What do you think? What do you see happening there? And if not, what should be done?
Well, a lot has happened already in a way, because if you're looking at especially at larger kind of multinational type of companies, these companies are already under enormous pressure to walk the talk. They have pressure from their investors to start off with, and we're seeing announcements from major funds across the economy saying we won't be investing anymore in unsustainable practices. So we're seeing that from customers, and ultimately it's a question of credibility. So what happens typically in this, I almost call it a cycle, is you start having awareness about an issue. That awareness about an issue translates into some kind of defensive action by corporations, saying, "Oh, let's try to manage this situation." And going back to that the towel example, that's a typically defensive thing. I.e., it's nice, people feel good, but after a while, people realize this is not going to change anything. This is not moving the needle. And that's when things start to get more complicated for corporations. That's when you start having a lot more pressure, and there are ways for corporations to address that pressure. The first thing is understanding what their role is with regard to sustainability. So that means monitoring, tracking, understanding what their footprint is, and not just carbon. I mean, we these days we focus a lot on carbon footprints, but the water footprint in some places is terrible. Understanding, just as Julia is saying, the carrying capacity. It's so different. An extra hotel in central Lisbon could tip over, put it this way, in terms of carrying capacity, whereas maybe the first hotel or the first tourist attraction in the middle of nowhere in nowhere, so to speak, Alentejo is a totally different proposition in terms of sustainability. You need to look at that. So first of all, they have to look at that. They have to understand the sustainability impact of that. So that can be done through an audit. you can do it through various certification processes, etc. If you're looking at carbon neutrality, there are already standards in place for companies to follow that trail. But beware of something, which is if you start walking that walk, it doesn't get easier. You gain a responsibility because now you're saying, I'm committed to doing something, and people will be looking at you to say, we'll take you on your word, right? So the worst thing that can happen, I would say, in Portuguese, we would say that it's worse than not doing anything. The worst thing that can happen is basically greenwashing, i.e. saying we're going to do something, but you don't take it to heart.
Only using it for marketing purposes, basically.
Exactly. I mean, it's nothing wrong about using it for marketing purposes.
But you still need to walk the talk.
But you need to do it.
Right.
You need to feel it as a priority. And by the way, going back to the core of all of this is, like we said before, this is about economic sustainability. So sustainability of the business itself. If we keep pushing the boundaries of sustainability in, for instance, in certain regions, you literally kill the golden goose, the goose that lays the golden eggs. And you're seeing that already with some destinations that are losing favor because there's nothing new there, and I think that's something that the sector needs to look into.
Thank you, Pedro. And again, it sort of entices new questions. Unfortunately, we won't have the time to address all of them. So I'd like to wrap it up by asking Julia the following. Based on your experience on projects related to tourism, where do you see that there is opportunities for us as a university, through sort of combining the efforts of the different faculties? Where do you see immediate opportunities for us to assist tourism, whether it's public or private entities, in achieving these sustainability goals?
Well, I see lots of opportunities. In terms of immediate, as you said, projects, there are lots of opportunities indeed. You can engage with the different stakeholders and try to contribute with solutions to reduce their carbon footprint in one side, and the other side try to support them in order to develop new models of tourism, because some of the persons, it happens in tourism as any other industry. People, the business established for many years, so why change? Because I know I'm very comfortable with that business, so to change requires some open mind, requires additional willingness, requires additional investment sometimes, but we are in that point. So I think we have a lot to do, and also not only in terms directly with the environmental engineering tools, but also with the digital options that we have as well. Mm-hmm. There is a great connection also with the health system and so on. But I have to tell you that the big opportunity that university have as regarding tourism is education. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, which guide all the industry products and service is the client, okay? And the client is to change, this mindset. And the university and the Nova okay, it has this environmental engineering course for 40 years, but right now Nova is starting a very important process of transformation even in their education programs in order to include sustainability issues across the board. Because when I decide to go to somewhere for my to spend my vacations, ultimately the decision is mine. In order to go there, I can share with you some personal decision that I take. I have taken different personal decisions regarding sustainability in the last 6 years, because one of the things that astonishing me is, for example, when I go lunch with my colleagues that are engaged in sustainability, Most of them, for example, this is a classic example, may eat beef. I mean, every day, and they know theory, by data, by everything that they have to reduce, but people are not available to change so easily. Okay, and regarding, for example, aviation, I decided last year that I will take only 2 trips by plane a year, one for business and one for leisure. I did not have yet the opportunity to keep this promise myself, because we have been in the pandemics.
Sure.
But I didn't go this year in vacations out of the country. But I intend to keep this, as I decide many other things regarding sustainability, regarding my behavior, my decisions. So. The first thing to tackle regarding sustainability is our decision, that is connected with our mindset, that ultimately is connected with information, with data, with education, with awareness.
Education.
And university is the origin of many of these issues.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for all the
myself.
insights from both of you. And, I hope we will be able to welcome you on future podcasts, because there's still a lot to be talked about. So thanks again. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you very much.
Pedro.
Thank you very much.
TOHO. Connected knowledge.